Hello, today I'll be doing a video on the game of Dreams and Shadows. This came out in 2016. I just got it on a sale for pretty cheap, I don't know, a few months ago. Hadn't had a chance to play it. Meant to get it played and do it in October for a Halloween type game. Didn't quite make that. Anyway, getting to it now. So let's get started with how to set up and play of Dreams and Shadows. First thing you'll do is place the map in the center of the play area. Next, you'll take the Fate token and place it on the number 1 space on the track here. Next, the players as a group will choose one of the 3 villains. I'm only going over the base game. I think there is some expansions that may add other villains. But just in the base game that I got, it comes with 3 villains. So you'll choose one to be the villain. So, for example, we'll choose Arwen here, or Aron. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. Anyway, there's an Act 1 and an Act 2 side. You're only supposed to read the Act 1 part to tell you how you need to set up for this villain. Though through my one playthrough of this, I would suggest also reading the Act 2 side, so you'll know kind of what you need to do in Act 1 to be able to face the villain in Act 2. But again, the rules say only read the Act 1 side. So if we look at this villain, it says for the beginning of the game, place quest and shadow tokens, each equal to half the number of champions on random hollow spaces, then place an undead corpse on each shadow token. So first of all, let's talk about the different types of spaces on the map. These with like a tunnel or upside down kind of horseshoe or arch, those are the hollow spaces. These with the windmill are realm spaces. These with the tree are wild spaces. And these with like the Disney castle are the capital. And that's seen here on anyway, so we need to place quest and shadow tokens equal to half the number of champions. Since that would kind of be odd for I normally play 3 players when I'm doing one of these. I'm going to do 4 players just so it's an even number. So with 4 players, we'll have to put 2 quest tokens and 2 shadow tokens on random hollow spaces. All right, the tokens I have in this little token holder, these are the shadow tokens, these are the quest tokens. To find a random token, you just keep picking up these tokens and looking at the back until you find one of the kind you're looking for. So we're looking for hollows tokens. So to place our 2 random shadow tokens, we'll just keep looking for shadow tokens until we find one that's a hollows token. And then when we find one, we will place it. All right, so there's a hollows 1, so that will go on hollows space 1, which is up here. So we need one more shadow token. And eventually we'll find another. There we go. And we got hollows space number 6, which is right here. All right, and now we'll do the same thing for the quest tokens and try to find hollows. Okay, we got a hollows 2, so we will place that quest token on hollow space number 2. And we need to find one more. There's one right there. That is hollow space number 3. All right, and we can just put these back in here, mix them back up, or however you want to do that to randomize those. Okay, and then finally it says then place an undead corpse on each shadow token. So there are a large number of standees that are enemies or foes, so we'll need to find the ones that are the undead corpse. The rules do say to go ahead and put your standees, sort them and lay them out by the side of the board so that you can easily find them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, sort them by type and lay them out by the side of the board. All right, I've got all these standees laid out. We need to find the undead corpse. That is these. So we need one of each because it said to place an undead corpse on each shadow token. So you place them. The standees come with these little stands to put them in, making them standees. Now, the way to know that these are the undead corpse is you can either look in the rule book and there's some little images, or there's some faux cards, which I'll show here in a little bit, that actually have this image and say what they are. I wish maybe it did say, somewhere on the bottom of each of these standees which one is which, but anyway, it doesn't. So we got to place one of these on each shadow token, so we have one there. And we've got one here, which will go up on this shadow token. All right, and that's the only setup part for this foe. There's some special rules to read here during Act 1 for this foe, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. Next, we need to get the cards that go along with our foe. So first thing we need is their quest deck. So there's one quest deck for each foe. It's kind of hard to figure out which one goes with which, but you'll notice the image here on each quest deck is slightly different. So looking in the rule book, the ones that are for our foe, Aron, or whatever his name, have this image. So we'll take that quest deck, shuffle it up, and place it near our foe. These other ones are for the other foes, the dragon and Morrigan. So for now, those can just go back in the box. Next, you'll find the foe cards that go along with your villain, and this is where I was talking about where you could tell the undead corpse is this standee because it matches the foe card. And you can tell which foe cards go with each villain because they say here, so this says an Aron foe. So there's 7 for each villain, I believe, except for the dragon. I think it says only has 6 foe cards. So you'll take those faux cards and just place them somewhere near the board. Since we have the undead corpse out, you may just want to leave that one revealed so you'll know the stats for that particular foe. Since we do have them out and on the map already. Next, you find the epic foes for your villains. So there's 3 epic foes for Aron. And again, it says that they are Aron epic foes. So you know which ones are for which villain, and just place them somewhere nearby. You should shuffle your regular foes just in case you need to draw one at random. There's no need to shuffle the epic foes. Next, you'll shuffle your affliction deck. That's the deck with this pack, and just place that somewhere near the bottom of the board or somewhere where the players can reach. Next, you'll take your scenario cards, so you'll have one for the wilds or one deck for the wilds. They'll have this back. You'll shuffle those up, place them nearby. You'll have similar scenario deck for the hollows, for the realm, and for the capital. So you make sure you shuffle those and place them all somewhere near the bottom of your board or where you have room to place them where all players can draw from those. All right, take your deck with this back. That's your event deck, and you'll place that somewhere nearby. The foe cards that are not aligned with your villain, so the regular foes, not the epic foes, but the regular foes that are aligned with the other 2 villains, the dragon and Morrigan, should be shuffled together and just placed into a foe deck that you may need to draw from if you run out of regular foes from your villain's foe deck. If all of those are out and you need to draw another foe, you can draw from that deck, or some scenario card may ask for a specific foe that may not be in your villain's foe deck. So you'll just set those nearby in case you need them. Next, each player will select one of the champions. So there's several champions to choose from. They have different stats. We'll, of course, talk about what those are when we learn how to play. But each player will choose one champion. I said we're going to set up for a 4-player game, so we'll choose 4 champions. All right, so I've chosen Hadrian, Freya, Selene, and Anton. Each champion has an ability that they can use that's unique to them, and a special action that they can use as one of their actions, which again we'll talk about what possible actions a player can do on their turn. And then there's a little flavor text here on the bottom that just gives you a little information on them. And of course, each champion has their stats: health, willpower, might, agility, insight, awareness, persuasion, and resolve. We'll see how those come into play throughout the game. But anyway, each player will choose 1 champion. You'll just set the other unused champions aside, because if your champion is killed off, which is likely to happen, at least what I've seen through the 1 play I've done of this game, then you can choose when it would be your next turn. You choose and start with one of the other champions, as long as you are still in Act 1. If you're in Act 2 and your champion is eliminated, then it's just you're out of the game. For each champion, you'll find the associated standee and place it in its starting location. So for instance, Hadrian here starts in the Albion capital, which would be right here, Albion, and this is a capital space. Freya starts in the Tyr capital, so that's up here, Tyr and the capital space. Selene here starts in, I don't know, Iru capital, so we'll place her there. There's Iru and the capital. And Anton here starts in hollow space number 2. And I think where is hollow space number 2? Here it is. So Anton starts here where this quest token is. There are 2 champion tokens like these that are for each champion that are used to mark your health and willpower. So we'll see that Hadrian here starts with 9 health and 4 willpower. These are the health and willpower tracks up here on the board. So for Hadrian, he starts with 9 health and 4 willpower. Freya is 8 health and 5 willpower. Selene is 5 health and 8 willpower. So 8 and 5. And finally, Anton over here is 7 health and 6 willpower. All right, next for each champion, you look at their starting resources. We see that Hadrian starts with plate armor. So we'll take our resource deck and search through it until we find the plate armor, and then place it next to Hadrian so that we know he's equipped with that. All right, so I found the plate armor. Just stick it next to Hadrian here. We'll see it gives him some bonuses in combat, and we'll talk about what those are when we get to combat. Next, we'll look for Freya. Her starting resources is just 2 coins or 2 gold. So here are some of the other tokens. We've seen the shadow tokens and quest tokens. These are to mark the foe's damage. These are called boon tokens, and then here's your coins or gold tokens, and they're in 1 or 3 denominations. So I've got 2. For Freya, we'll just put them on her card. For Selene, her starting resource is warding, so we'll look through the resource deck to find that. All right, found that. We'll see that that is a spell. Only champions that have the spirit touched ability can have spells. So out of the 4 that I've got here, the only champion that does have spirit touched is Selene. Hadrian, Freya, and Anton do not have that. So Selene would be the only one that would be able to acquire spells. And finally, we see that Anton's starting resources is 3 gold or 3 coins. So I'll just give him a 3 value coin. You'll see it has the Roman numeral 3 on there. And finally, we do what's called creating the hand. We shuffle up our resource deck and then deal 5 cards face up. And these are available, or will be available, for the champions to acquire in certain ways, which we'll talk about as we play the game. But with that, I think we've completed setup. There are a couple of dice that you need to keep nearby for the players to roll. But I think we're ready to move on to how to play. Alright, so how do we play? Well, the game is played in 2 acts. You have Act 1, which is made up of 5 different turns, and those are tracked here. Each turn in Act 1 is made up of 4 phases. The first phase is the action phase, in which each player will get to take 3 actions. After all the players have taken their 3 actions, you go on to the combat phase, where any players that are on spaces, or any champions that are on spaces with villains or with foes, will end up having a combat with that foe. And even there may be some foes that are out that don't have a champion on their space, but they may still have some effect that takes place during the combat phase. You then go on to the scenario phase, where players will draw a scenario card depending on what space they're on the board, and attempt to resolve that, or they do resolve it and success or fail depending on what is on that card. And then finally the event phase, where an event card will be drawn and that will be resolved. After the event phase, you advance on the fate dial, advance the marker on the fate dial, and begin a new turn. At the end of 5 turns in Act 1, you'll flip over the villain to Act 2. In Act 2, that's when you'll really be trying to defeat the main villain. And there's only 2 phases. There's the action phase. Each player will take their action during the action phase. And then there's a combat phase. There's no scenario phase or event phase in Act 2. And Act 2 continues until either the players defeat the villain, or if the villain defeats all the players, or 5 turns take place in Act 2 and the villain is not defeated, then the villain wins. So let's go into more detail in each phase, starting with Act 1. So the first thing you'll do at the beginning of each turn is determine which champion has initiative, and you do that by comparing their agility and seeing which one has the highest agility. So we'll see Anton has an agility of 3, Celine she has an agility of 3, Freya has an agility of 3, and Hadrian only has an agility of 2. So Freya, Celine, and Anton all have the same agility. Since there's a tie for highest, the tied players decide among them who will be first. So I think we'll just choose Anton to be the first player, and then play continues in clockwise order. So we'll start, Anton will be our first player, then Celine, then Freya, and then Hadrian for this turn. So in each phase of the turn, that's the order that we'll go in. So in the action phase, we'll start Anton and go clockwise. In the combat phase, we'll start Anton and go clockwise. In the scenario phase, and so forth. So let's start with the action phase. What can you do in the action phase? As I said earlier, when it's a player's action phase, they can take 3 actions. So let's talk about the possible actions. So one action Anton can take, since he's first, is the travel action. In the travel action, you just move from the space you're on to the next connected space. You'll see that some lines are solid lines and some lines are dotted lines. The dotted lines are apparently underground passages, while the solid lines are above ground passages. In the base game, it doesn't make any difference. I believe in some of the expansions that does come into play, but in the base game, it doesn't matter whether you're moving along a solid line or a dotted line. So for one action, oops, knocked this guy over. For one action, you can move across a path to one of the next spaces on the map. And of course you can take the same action multiple times, so if you wanted to spend all three of your actions moving or traveling, you could do so. But anyway, so one action to move to an adjacent space connected by either a solid or dotted line. That's travel action. Another possible action you can do is rest, and that allows you to heal 2 health, though you cannot go above your starting health. So for instance, if Anton had been taken 1 damage and was down to 6 health, and he rested, although rest usually gives you 2 health, since his max health is 7, he could only gain 1. But if he had dropped 2 or more health, then went for a rest action, he could gain 2 health. Alright, another possible action is to acquire one of the cards from the hand. If you are in a realm space or a capital space, you can acquire a card from the hand by paying the cost. Now, most of them have like a gold cost, like this one costs 3 gold, this one costs 2, 2, 3, and 3. There are some that may have a test that you need to do in order to acquire it instead of paying a gold amount. But anyway, so for one action, if you are in a realm space or a capital space, you can and you can afford to or can pass the test to acquire one of the resource cards. You take that and just place it next to your champion, and then that's an equipped or an attached card that is available to be used for your champion. And then once you've acquired one of the resource cards, you refill the missing one from the deck. Again, as I mentioned earlier, spell cards can only be acquired by champions that have the spirit touched, and there may be some relic cards that come out. Relic cards cannot be acquired in the normal way by just being on a realm space or a capital space by paying gold or passing a test to get them. You either have to acquire them from a special ability. For instance, Anton has a special ability or a special action that he can take for one of his actions while he's on a hollow space. He can test awareness against a score of 7 to acquire a relic card from the hand. We'll talk about how you perform those tests here in a minute, but that's one way you can acquire a relic, or at least Anton can. The other ways to acquire one, if there's out there, is there may be some scenarios or event cards that allow you the ability to acquire a relic. But otherwise, you can't just get one by using the acquire resource action when you're on a realm or capital space. I will also mention when you acquire a resource card from the hand, or attempt to acquire a resource card from the hand through a persuasion test, you can, when you go to restock the hand back up to 5, you can also discard another card from the hand back to the resource deck and replace it with a different card. So for example, if Anton decided to, if he was in a space where he could get the mail armor and he purchased that and paid the 2 gold for it and attached it to him, and he also wanted to see if he could get a different card to come out, he could discard this back to the resource deck and refill both spaces. But if he wanted to leave this one out there, he could just take the one that he acquired and refill that one space. Okay, so that's the acquire resource action. Again, you can do any of these actions as many times as you want, up to your total of 3 actions. Another action you can do is to invoke a spell. If you're a player that has spells like Celine, she could spend an action to invoke this spell. And for an you'll see for an action it says any champion on the same space can reduce the attack. That symbol means the attack by a foe by 1 when defending this turn. And again, we'll talk more about attacking and combat and so forth later. But one of the possible actions you can do is invoking a spell if you're a player that can cast spells. Alright, another possible action you can take on your turn is the gift or take action. If you are on the same space as another champion, you can either you can give gold or boon tokens if you have them, or quest tokens if you have them, or some resources can be given. So you can either spend the action to give resources, gold or tokens to another player, or you can spend the action to take, of course with their consent, from another player on that same space. Take resources, gold, or quest tokens. Now there's some resources that you can't give or take, and these ones that say combat feat, you can't give or take those with an action. Spells, you can't give or take spells. We don't have any companion resources out here right now, but some of these resources will say companion, and you can't give or take a companion. Alright, another type of action you can do is one we've already seen, the special action of your champion. We saw Anton's special action, which allows him to test to try to acquire a relic card, but each champion has their own special action unique to them. So like Celine's is look at the top 2 cards of the event deck, place 1 card back to the top of the deck and the other at the bottom. Freya's is she can gain 2 travel actions, but she loses 2 health if she does that. That one doesn't seem very good to me. And Hadrian's is he can regain 1 will. That's the willpower symbol. So he can take a special action to regain 1 willpower. Again, can't go above your starting willpower. Alright, another action you can take is Purge Shadow Token. So if a champ is on a space with a shadow token, they can purge it. In other words, remove it from the board. There's reasons you want to do that depending on the villain. For example, we'll look at Aron's ability here a little bit more in detail, but I'll just mention that it says there at the end of the turn, he will spawn foes on every shadow token. He'll place new shadow tokens out and spawn foes on every shadow token on the board. So it's a good thing to get rid of those shadow tokens. So using the Purge Shadow token action when you're on the space, if you're on the space with one, is recommended. Alright, so let's talk about tests. So there's various challenges that'll come up in scenarios, quests, some champions, like for their special action for here, like Anton has to do a test. So while on a hollow space, he can test awareness against a score of 7. Combat is test. So let's talk about how test works. We'll use, for example, Anton's ability here. So again, if he's on a hollow space, he can test his awareness against a score of 7. So whenever you do a test, you roll 1 die and then add the value of your that you have in that ability already. So for instance, his awareness is 3, so he would roll a die. 5, that would give him a total of 8. If you're equal to or greater than the value you're testing against, then you pass. So in this case, if there was a relic card, if he did that action and there was a relic card in there, he would have passed the test and been able to acquire it. If you failed the test, in this case, he would just not get to acquire a relic card if there was one. But if there's some of the scenario cards and quest cards, and in combat, there's going to be probably some negative effect if you fail a test. So whenever you're testing something, you'll roll 1 die, add the total of your ability in what you're testing, and if that total is equal to or greater, then you pass. If it's less than, then you fail. And we'll see how that works in combat here in just a bit. Now, whenever you're testing against one of your traits, like I mentioned, and you roll a die, you can spend willpower to increase the number on that die roll up to a total of 6 on that die. So if you rolled a 4, if Hadrian rolled a 4 and he needed a 6, he could spend 2 willpower to increase his die roll up to a 6. Now you can't increase above a 6 by spending your willpower, but you can spend willpower to increase your die roll by 1 point per willpower spent, up to a total of 6. Now one thing, both health and willpower, if they ever drop to 0, your hero is killed or eliminated. So you don't, even though spending your willpower to increase your die roll sounds like a good thing, it can be dangerous, because if your willpower drops because of game effect and you're already pretty low, well, that could eliminate your character. Boon tokens can be acquired by certain characters and in certain ways. Those can be spent to increase your die roll as well, but those, if you have enough of them, you can spend them to increase your die roll above 6. Whereas if you're spending willpower, you can't increase your die roll higher than 6, but if you're spending boon tokens that you've acquired, you can increase your die roll to be higher than 6, if you have enough to spend that much. Alright, that pretty much covers all the possible actions that players can do, and when we go through our example turns, we'll see exactly how that works as we play. So the next phase after the action phase, again, all the players will take their 3 actions. Then you go to the combat phase, and again, you'll go in turn order, resolving any combat that player may be in, if they're in a space with a foe. So let's talk about how combat works. Alright, so after the actions phase, we go to the combat phase, in which each champion that is on the space with a foe will enter combat. So we'll say, example, maybe Hadrian here was on a space here with an undead corpse. So again, you go in the order that you've determined at the beginning of the round. So you check if Anton was on a space with an enemy. We'll say right now nobody's on a space with an enemy but Hadrian, so we come to Hadrian. He will have to enter combat with this undead corpse. So combat is done in rounds. You'll have where the champion attacks, then the champion will defend in the round, and then if neither the champion or the foe is defeated, then you go to another round of combat. Now, before entering another round of combat, the champion does have the option to retreat. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but let's talk about like your initial round of combat, where you're going to attack, and then where you're going to defend. Those are simultaneously, so even if you do enough damage on your attack where you could defeat the foe that you're fighting, because the combat is simultaneous, they still get their attack and you still have to defend. So this is an undead corpse. We would look at the foe card that we have out for that foe. We'll see their defense is a 5, their attack is a 7, their health is a 3, and you check their special abilities. This one is after 1 turn on the map, you replace the undead corpses with undead hordes. So that's a different type of foe, but that would happen at the end of the turn after they've been on the map for a full turn. So that's not really relevant for our round of combat. So first thing we'll do is attack. So we'll have to take into account the defense of the foe that we're fighting, which is a 5. When you make an attack, you'll roll a die, and you'll add that to your might. So in this case for Hadrian, his might is 5. Then he'll roll a die. He needs for every point he gets above 5, the defense of the undead corpse, he'll do 1 damage to that foe. So say he rolls, he got a 2, plus his might of 5, that's a 7. So if he just stayed with that, he could do 2 damage to it. It would not be dead yet because it has 3 health. So he could just take one of these health markers on there to show that he's done 2 damage to it. But he could decide to spend 1 willpower to increase that roll to a 3, and then that would do enough to defeat it. So we'll say he does that. He spends the 1 willpower, increases his die roll to a 3, added to his might is 8, minus the defense is still 3 damage. So because this foe only has 3 health, it would be killed. Now it does still get to do its 1 attack, as I said. Even if you defeat it in that round, it still gets its attack for that round. So its attack is a 7. You're going to try to defend with your agility plus a die roll. So he gets a 4, plus his agility is a 2, so a total of 6, but the undead corpse attack is 7. So it does do 1 damage to Hadrian. So Hadrian would have to reduce his health by 1. Well, but that's not true, because I forgot to take an effect. He has his plate armor, which reduces the attack of the foe by 2 when defending, or he could discard the plate armor to reduce the attack by 4 when defending. But just reducing the attack by 2 would make it a 5, so his agility plus his roll of 4 would be 6, which is more than a higher defense than the attack value of 5 by the undead corpse, since their attack value was reduced by 2 by his armor. So he wouldn't have taken any damage after all. And of course he could have spent a willpower if he wanted to increase his die roll, but it wasn't necessary because with his plate armor. And one other option you have, once per combat, you can spend 1 willpower to re-roll your die instead of just increasing the number of it. But you can only do that once per combat, so if you did it like on your attack, you couldn't do it on your defense as well, or on a future round of that combat. It's only once per combat that you can spend a willpower to re-roll a die. But for any roll in the combat, you can spend a willpower to increase your die. And as I mentioned earlier, though, that willpower, if that gets reduced below 0, then your champion is eliminated. And Hadrian does have a special action he can take to regain willpower, but otherwise, at least in the game that I played, it seemed pretty difficult to find a way to increase your willpower. You do have an action where you can heal 2 health, but there isn't an action where you can increase your willpower, so there's not a lot of ways to get that up once it's reduced. And also, if you have boon tokens, you can spend those to increase the value of your die roll. But anyway, so again, to summarize, in a combat, you will first make an attack, so you'll check your might value, roll a die, add the value of the die to your might value, the difference between the foe's defense and your total attack, which was your might plus your die. The difference between the defense and that is how much damage that foe will take. Then you look at the foe's attack value. You'll try to defend against that by looking at your agility, rolling a die, and adding those together. The difference between the foe's attack value and your defense, which was your agility plus your roll. If the attack value is higher, then you'll take damage, reducing your health by the difference there. And then if both of you are still alive, then you'll do another round of combat. Unless, of course, at the end of one round of combat, the champion decides they want to retreat. So after a round of combat, if maybe you think you're not going to be able to win, and if you fight another round you might be killed, you can retreat. When you retreat, you have to move to the last space that you moved from. Now, if you've never moved, if that's the space you started on, then you can't retreat. But if you can retreat, like if you had moved there in a previous turn, doesn't necessarily have to be that turn, but a previous turn, if you move there from another space, you can retreat to that space. But you cannot retreat if there's a foe there So if there's a foe in the last space you moved from, then you wouldn't be able to retreat. And some other game effects or scenarios may say that you're not able to retreat from that combat. So if you can't, then you just have to finish the combat and, get lucky and live or possibly perish. If multiple champions are on a space with a foe when combat takes place, then they both get to make an attack roll, and then they choose which champion has to make the defense roll. So they don't both make a defense roll. They both make an attack roll, but only one of them has to make a defense roll. Unless there are multiple enemies, multiple foes, then they can both choose to make an attack roll against the same foe, or each choose to attack a different foe. And then when the foes attack back, they can choose one champion to defend against, the attacks from, both foes or however many foes are in there. Or they can split the defend, have one champion defend against one foe and one champion defend against another foe, and so forth. So I think that pretty much covers the combat phase. So you'll do that again for any space that has a champion on a space with a foe. And then there may be some enemies or some foes that don't have a champion in their space, but if you look at their special ability, it may say that something happens in the combat phase. So even if they don't fight anybody, whatever, if they have an effect that takes place during the combat phase, then that will still take effect, even if there is not a champion in their space. We may see that come into play in our example terms. When a foe is defeated, whichever player dealt the killing blow to that foe gets any reward on that foe. So for example, for this foe, for defeating it, you would get 1 gold. The foe is then removed from the board. If it's a regular foe, its card is shuffled back into the foe deck. If it's one of the epic foes, which those usually only come out if you're doing quests, we haven't talked about that yet. But if an epic foe is defeated, then it's removed from the game. It doesn't get shuffled back into the deck. If a foe is not defeated, but it does take some damage, the damage remains with it. So like if it was a foe that had 3 health and it took 2 damage, then it would keep that 2 damage with it. So it would only, in the future, if somebody else attacked that foe, it would only need 1 damage to kill it. And as I mentioned earlier, if a champion is defeated, then their standee is removed, their champion card and any attached resources to that champion are removed from the game. And then at the beginning of the next turn, if it's still in Act 1, the player who lost their champion can choose one of the champions that hasn't been used yet and set it back up just like they would at the start of the game and use it going forward starting from that turn. Alright, so that's the combat phase. The next phase to talk about is the scenario phase. Alright, so in the scenario phase, starting with the player that had first initiative and continuing clockwise like in all the other phases, the player will look at the space they're on. So for instance, Anton, he's on a quest token or a hollow space. So since he has a quest token, he can choose the card from the quest deck, or he can choose to draw the top card from the hollows deck. If you're not on a quest token, then you must draw the top card from the type of space you're on. So for instance, Hadrian here would draw that card from the capital deck on his turn. Well, all the others are on a capital. But if you were on a wild space, you would draw from the wilds deck. If you were on a realm space, you would draw from the realm deck. So anyway, you draw a card, and they pass the card to another player who then reads it, and usually it'll have some story, and then a test or a choice. The player who's reading the card does not inform the player of the outcome of the pass or fail for the test or the outcome depending on the choice until after they've done the test and either succeeded or failed, or until they've done the choice. So let's look at an example. We'll say Anton chose to take a card from the hollow space. He would then pass that to another player who would read, "You enter a large room filled with implements of torture, placed neatly on a nearby table. Dried blood stains cover its surface. More dark stains are spattered across the walls. Manacled chains hangs from the ceiling. A desk filled with notes has been placed in a corner. And a desk filled with notes has been placed in a corner. Someone was tortured and murdered in this room. You examine this scene to see if there are other clues, test awareness or insight against a score of 8. So that's all that they would read to the player. So then the player would decide which one of those they're going to test. They do the test, and if they're successful, the player reading the card tells them what happens for succeeding, and if there's a failure, they tell them what happens for failing. And sometimes there may be, like, quest cards are usually 2 parts, so if you succeed at the first part, you can go on to the second part. If you don't succeed at the first part, you don't go on to the second part. But we'll see more of those. I don't want to spoil too many of them, so we'll see some more of these when we start doing some sample turns. Then after a player has completed their scenario card, you place it face up under the deck it was drawn from. So if ever you go through all those cards and you come, when there's no more to draw, they're all face up, then no more scenarios can come from that deck. Once all the champions have done their scenario phase and had chosen a scenario or quest card, depending on if they had a quest token or not, then we move on to the event phase. So the event phase is pretty simple. One player will choose the top card from the event deck, read it, and resolve it. So for example, this one, Plague Sickness. Place one undead corpse, that's a foe, on any realm space with a champion. So you would randomly choose that if there was a realm space with a champion, or if there was more than one space. So you would do that, I guess, with this card. If there wasn't a realm space with a champion, then you wouldn't have to place an undead corpse. But anyway, once you resolve that event, then you go ahead and do any end of turn things that might be on your foe card, for during Act 1. So for example, for Arwan here, we'll just read his. This isn't the end of turn, this first sentence, but when a champion gains a guest quest token, which that normally happens when in the scenario phase, if a player chooses a quest and completes it successfully, then they'll usually gain the quest token that's on their space. But it says when a champion gains a quest token, place a new quest token on a hollow space. And then here's the part that you would do at the end of the event phase after you've resolved the event. At the end of each turn, move all foes one space towards the nearest capital. Then place new shadow tokens on the map equal to half the number of champions. And if you have an odd number of champions, like 1 or 3, then you round that number up, by the way. And also place a random foe on all shadow tokens. That's just drawing from your foe deck to determine what foe is going to go on the shadow tokens. If a foe moves to a capital space, each champion will lose 1 willpower. Alright, so once you've done that portion of your villain card, of course that will be different for each villain, you then move the fate token on the fate dial and begin a new turn. You do the same thing until the end of turn 5. When you would move to Act 2, after you've completed turn 5, then you move to Act 2, flip the card over. As I said, at that point you're usually the villain usually gets placed on the map, and then you're trying to defeat him, and you don't have all the phases like before. You only have the actions phase, or the combat phase. I mean, the actions phase and the combat phase. There's no scenario and event phase. And then in Act 2, you have, the 5 turns to defeat the villain. If you don't defeat the villain by the end of the 5th turn of Act 2, then the players lose. Or if the villain defeats all the champions before the end of the 5th turn, and or any time in Act 2 really, then the players lose. I will mention that, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when you go to Act 2, all the champions regain their willpower back to its starting value at the beginning of Act 2. And I know I did mention in Act 1, if your champion gets eliminated, you can come back at the beginning of the next turn with a new champion, one that hasn't previously been used. But in Act 2, if your champion is eliminated, you're just out of the game. And anyway, I think that covers pretty much how to play. There are some affliction cards that you'll gain or could possibly gain from failing scenarios or quests or some other effect. And they get attached to your champion, and they have some negative effects. So for instance, if you got this one cursed, the champion may only roll 1 die for any test and may not use willpower to reroll. And then you can roll a die at the end of every turn and discard the curse card on a roll of 5 or 6. Lose 1 willpower on a roll of 1. So they're different afflictions that you can get, and they are all negative consequences to your champion. All right, I'm going to get everything set back up how we were right after setup, and we'll go through a few example turns. Alright, I believe I've got everybody back on the spaces and everything where it was right after setup. So again, the first thing you do at the beginning of a turn is determine initiative, and as we saw through our learn to play information, Anton, Celine, and Freya are all tied for the same amount of agility. So we decide which one of them is going to be the first player. I think we decided Anton, so that's what I'm going to stick with in this example turn. Alright, so we're going to start with Anton. He's on a hollow space with a quest token. I don't think he's ready to, he won't be able to acquire anything from the hand there. So I think what he's going to do for one of his actions, one of his 3 actions, he's going to travel to this realm space. Now, because he's on a realm space, either on a realm space or capital space, you can acquire a resource from the hand. So I think he wants some armor, so he's going to try to get this mail armor, or he is going to get it. It costs 2 gold. He's got 3, so he'll put that in, get 1 back, and he's going to acquire this mail armor. And then I think he's also, remember I said when you acquire something you can also discard a card. I think he's going to discard this distract. So he'll refill both those spaces now. So that's 2 of his actions, and we see that this sword came out that's a relic. So he would really like to get that. It increases your might by 3. So for his 3rd and final action, he's going to use his special... Oh, well, he can't use that. He can only do that on a hollow space. So I think he's going to go ahead and move back for his 3rd action, to move back to this space here. Alright, we come to Celine's turn now. She is on a capital space, but she's got no gold. She didn't start with any gold, so she can't really acquire anything from the hand. So I think what she's going to do is she's going to move to where there is a foe, and then hope that maybe Hadrian will come over and help her in the combat phase. So I think she's just going to move 3 times. So she'll move 1, 2, 3, and end up down here where there's this foe. That's all 3 of her actions, so that's all that she can do. Alright, we now come to Freya. She is on a capital space, so she can acquire a resource, and I think that's what she wants to do. She wants some armor as well, so I think she's going to purchase some mail armor. So she's going to spend the 2 gold that she has to get this mail armor and attach that to her. And then we'll refill the hand. Doesn't look like she's going to be able to get to anywhere where she's going to be able to do any combat. I think for her second action she will move here, and for her, gosh, where she really needs to try to get over here. For her third action, I guess she's going to move here, so not really a whole lot she could do. Alright, so now we'll go on to Hadrian's turn, and he's going to go help Selene over here combat this undead corpse. So one action he's going to travel here. For a second action he's going to travel here. For a third action he will purge that shadow token that's on that space. Alright, that's going to be all 3 of his actions, so that is going to wrap up the actions phase, and now we'll move on to the combat phase. So, since well, we do in order. Anton's not in the space with a foe. Selene is in a space with a foe, so she can do combat. But all champions that are in the space with the foe can attack that foe before one of them has to defend. So both Hadrian and Selene are going to make an attack against this undead corpse, which has a defense of 5. We'll have Selene roll first. She's got only a might of 2, but she got lucky and rolled a 6. That gives her an 8 against a defense of 5, so that's going to be 3 damage. So Hadrian's not even going to need to roll his attack roll because the enemy is already going to be defeated. But we do have to choose one of them to make the defense roll, and we'll choose Hadrian to do that. So his agility is 2, and then his roll of 4 gives him a 6 against the attack of 7, but it's reduced by 2 because of the armor he's wearing, so it's an attack of 5. So his defense roll was higher than the attack roll of the undead corpse, so nobody takes any damage. The undead corpse is defeated. Because Selene actually did the killing blow, she gets the reward of 1 gold. So we'll give her that 1 gold. Alright, and that is all the combat that's going to take place. There's no other effect other than at the end of the turn, the 1 undead corpse that's remaining here is going to be replaced. I mean, the 1 undead corpse, yeah, is going to be replaced with an undead horde, but we'll do that at the end of the turn. So that's it for the combat phase. We'll now move on to the scenario phase. So we start the scenario phase with the player that has initiative, which is Anton. He is where there's a quest token, so he could decide to draw from the quest deck, but I don't think he thinks he's prepared. The quest might be a little too hard. He doesn't really have a weapon or anything at this point. So I think because he's on a hollow space, he's going to go ahead and draw from the hollows deck. So he would give this card to another player who would read it. Since I'm the only player here, I'll just do it myself. Alright, so we've got Cave In. You have been traveling down a tunnel for several hours. The floors and walls become rougher, and you must step over large stones that have crumbled from the ceiling. Test awareness against a score of 6. Now, the Anton player isn't told what will happen if he's going to succeed or fail. He just knows he's got to test awareness against a score of 6. Alright, well, he's got an awareness of 3. He's going to roll a dice. He does have this passive ability for all tests on hollow spaces, which he is on, roll an extra die and choose the highest result. So he actually gets to roll 2 die and choose the higher result because he is on a hollow space. So he just needs a 3 or better on one of these, which he will choose this one. That will give him a 7 because it's a 4 and his awareness is 3, so he's a success. So the player that had the card would read, "You notice faint dust motes falling around you. Recognizing the warning, you leap out of the way just as several stones crash to the floor." Unfortunately, he didn't really gain anything for this scenario, but at least he would have lost a health if he had failed that and got a crippled affliction. Anyway, this now goes to the bottom of the Hollows deck face up. We now move on to Celine. She is on a hollow space as well, so she will draw a card, hand it to the player, and they will read it. And let's see what we got here. Library of Secrets. A crumbling wall reveals a new passage. Unmarked on any Hollows map, you decide to explore the undiscovered area. Dust hangs heavy in the air as the path eventually leads you into a large hall filled with sealed shelves. Books and scrolls have been preserved within. You gain, looks like, 1 gold for your find. Test insight against a score of 8. Well, she gets 1 gold for her find first. So we'll give her that, and now she has to test insight against a score of 8. She has a trait of 4 in insight, so she needs at least a 4 to succeed here. She does. She gets a 6, so the player would read the success. You find an ancient text that provides helpful information on your quest. Gain a boon token. So remember, those can be used to increase die rolls. Alright, now we come to Freya. She's got to do her scenario. She is up here on a wild space, so she'll draw a scenario card from the wilds and hand that. Journeying through the woods, you reach a hunter's lodge that is perched on a steep hill. You are greeted by a large band of woodsmen and hunters. Their leader offers you a chance to join them in ridding the forest of a monstrous beast that has been killing local livestock and unwary travelers. He announces that the hunt is about to begin and a reward will be given to the one that slays the monster. You decide to join them. Test awareness against a score of 7. Alright, well, she's got an awareness of 3, so she'll need at least a 4 to be successful here. So she's going to fail, so the player would read the fail section. Now, of course, she could spend willpower to increase that, but she would, had to increase it by 3. She would have to spend 3 willpower to increase that. She doesn't want to do that. So we read the failure. Your search is fruitless and you return to the lodge empty-handed. The rest of the hunters return carrying their leader's bloodied and lifeless form. He was ambushed by the beast and it is still out there somewhere. Lose 1 willpower. So she loses 1 willpower anyway, so that didn't turn out too well for Freya. Alright, and finally we move on to Hadrian, who is on a hollow space as well. So we'll read his card. A fresh breeze washes over you as you enter a large open-air cave. Moonlight is shining down through a circular shaft in the ceiling. The dark forms of bats can be seen flying through the mouth of the cave, their screeches echoing in a cacophony of noise. A large stone statue is standing off to one side. It is a depiction of an armored knight in solemn repose with both hands clasping a long sword pointed straight down. The knight's face is hidden by a closed visor of a winged helm. A plaque has been placed before it with inscriptions in an unfamiliar language. Test insight against a score of 7. Unfortunately, Hadrian's insight is only 2, so he's going to need a 5 or better to be successful here. So we'll see what happens. Oh, he gets it, a 5, so success. Alright, you translate the writing and learn the tragic story of a heroic knight that fell to Arwan's darkness. He was a man of virtue, forced to serve his foul king until the very end. You read further and gain more insight into the curse that ultimately bound the villain. Gain a +2 boon token. Alright, so he'll take a 2 value boon token. Alright, all our champions have finished with the scenario phase, so now we move on to the event phase. Alright, now we move on to the events phase. So one of the players will turn over an event card. We got War of the Fae. Place one foe aligned with Morrigan on any wild space with a champion. Alright, so we just have to find a foe aligned with Morrigan. I believe this is Morrigan. So that is going to be a changeling. Because we do have a wild space with a champion, that's Freya. So we need to find a changeling's foe and place it there. Alright, so I've done that. I've placed the changeling's foe up here on the space, the wild space with Freya. That's going to take care of that event card. So now we have to do this. At the end of each turn, move all foes one space towards the nearest capital. So this, let's see, the nearest capital is either 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, either way. So one space, we'll move this one space toward the nearest capital here. Let's see, this foe, where's the nearest capital for him? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So he is going to come here. Oops. Alright. Then place new shadow tokens on the map equal to half the number of champions and a random foe on all shadow tokens. Alright, so we got to put 2 new shadow tokens, so we'll grab one at random here. That's going to go on Wilds 3, and that is where, oh, that's right up here where Freya is, and we need one more. We'll grab this one. Wilds 1, that's up here. And then a random foe on each shadow token, so let's see. A Fallen Knight. So we'll place him here. Alright, and we've got a Death Cultists. Alright, and we'll place them on that shadow token, and we've got one more shadow token, so we've got a Vampire Maiden. Alright, so she's going to go there with Freya. And let's see, let's get all our foes that are out on the board. Oh, and that undead corpse after one turn on the map is replaced with an undead horde. So I swapped the undead corpse out for an undead horde, and that's going to go there where it was. Alright, and that is going to end the turn. So we advance the fate dial, and now we're on turn 2. We'll do one more turn, but you can see it looks like we're already in some trouble. Alright, so again we're starting a new turn, so we just determine initiative. Because Freya and Celine and Anton all have the same agility, we can choose one of them to be the first player this time, or have initiative. I think we're going to choose Freya to have initiative, so she'll be first this time. So I think we're going to start with her. She is going to, let's see, she's up here on a, she's going to do for one action, she's going to do a Purge Shadow. So she's going to remove this shadow token. Then she's going to travel here for her second action, and for her third action she's going to do another Purge Shadow token and remove this shadow token. Alright, so now we go on to Hadrian. It's going to be his turn. So let's see, he probably needs to get up and try to defeat some of these foes. So he's going to travel for one action, travel for a second action, and travel for a third action to the space with these changelings. Alright, now we're going to come to Anton. He is over here on the space with this quest token and a hollow space. So I think he's going to, for his first action, he's going to do this. While on a hollow space, test awareness against a score of 7 to acquire one relic card from the hand. That's the sword he wants to get. So he's going to do that. So he's going to test his awareness, and because he's on a hollow space, for all tests on a hollow space, he gets to roll 2 die and choose the highest. His awareness is a 3, so we need at least a 4 on one of these. We got a 6, so he gets to acquire this relic, which that's going to help him out quite a bit. We'll just put that there, and then he will refill this, and I think he's going to discard another one and refill that. Alright. I think he wants to stay here to fight this undead horde, so I don't think he's going to travel. So that may be, I guess he could do, for another action, he could try to acquire this relic, because we got another one that came out. So he's going to do the same thing. He's going to use this special action to try to acquire this primordial crown relic. So again, because he's still on a hollow space, he gets to roll 2 dice as long as we get a 4 or better, which we did. He acquires this primordial crown. We'll just attach that to him here and refill here. And I think that's pretty much all he's going to... I mean, he still has 1 action left, but I don't think he wants to use it, so that's going to end his turn. So we'll now go on to Celine. I think she is going to use... She'll spend 2 of her actions to travel, to get her up here. And then I think for her 3rd action, she's going to use her special ability to look at the top 2 cards of the event deck, place 1 card back on the top and the other in the bottom of the deck. So we'll look at the top 2. They're probably both bad. Champions may not take an action to acquire resources on the next turn, or each champion may choose to regain 4 health or 2 willpower. Well, we know that one's actually pretty good, so we'll put that one on the top and this one on the bottom. And now, because we know that's coming out, our players know in the combat phase they can spend some willpower because they're going to be able to gain some back. And that is going to end Celine's turn, and that's going to end the actions phase. So now we'll go on to the combat phase. Alright, well, Freya was our player with initiative, so she will start the combat phase. She is up here in a space with, gosh, what is that? A fallen knight, it looks like, so that's what she will have to combat. Let's look at his card. His special ability is combat is considered a duel. That really doesn't come into play here. If there were other champions in there, then they wouldn't be able to assist Freya, because when you're in a duel, it's just a one-on-one. But there's no other champions in there to assist anyway. Other than that, let's see, he's got a defense of 7, attack of 9, and a health of 6. Alright, so Freya's got to make an attack. She's got a might of 4, and she does have this ability for tests. All tests in combat, roll an extra die and choose the highest. Alright, so she will roll. She got a 2 and a 5. So a 5 plus her might of 4 is a 9. She's going to go ahead and spend a willpower just because we know we're going to get one back. So that's going to make this die a 6. So she has an attack of 10 against his defense of 7. So he's going to take 3 damage. That's not going to kill him since he's got a health of 6, but it gets him halfway there. Alright, now she's got to defend. Again, because this is a test in combat, she gets to roll both dice. Her agility is 3. Oh, that wasn't good. She's going to spend a willpower to re-roll. She's going to re-roll. She gets to re-roll both. This one up here was a 5, so she'll take that. So 5 plus her agility of 3 is 8. Against his attack of 9, so she will take 1 damage. So she got to move her health marker down 1. Oh, actually not. I forgot she has this mail armor, which reduces his attack by 2. So she actually doesn't have to lose a health. Alright, so now we go on to the next round of combat. So she'll attack again. And And she did not get a very good roll, and I don't think she really wants to spend any more willpower. So she's going to have this one, which a 3 plus her might of 4 is 7, which only equals his defense, so that's not going to get her any. That's not going to do any damage. Now she has to make a defense roll. Oops, that's not it. And that's terrible. She got a 2. Against his attack of 9, which is reduced by 2 because of the armor. So 7 from 2, she's going to take 5 damage. Well, no, it's not 2. Her agility is 5, so she's got to take 2 damage. Alright, she could retreat. Oh, but no, she couldn't, because she can't retreat to where there's a foe, and she came from where there's a foe. She's going to have to attack again. Oh my goodness. That's terrible. Alright, so a 2 plus her might is 6, which is less than his defense, so she's not going to do any damage. He's going to attack her back now. And she rolls terrible again. 2. Her agility of 3 is 5. His attack is 7, because of the armor. So 5, so she's going to take 2 more damage. Alright, another round of combat. Let's get a good roll this time, Freya. Alright, she got a 6. So a 6 plus her might of 4 is going to be 10. So that's going to do enough damage. That's going to do 3 damage. So he'll die this. We don't need to put it on there. He's going to be dead. But she still has to make her defense roll. And she gets a 6 plus her agility of 3, which is 9, which is greater than his attack. So he is killed. So remove him. She gets 2 gold for defeating him. And since there's no other fallen knights on the board, we'll shuffle this back in this deck. Alright, so that's going to end Freya's combat. We will now move on to Hadrian. He is also in a spot with a foe. He's in a spot with the changelings. So let's see what they got. A defense of 5, an attack of 8, and a health of 5. Alright, well Hadrian doesn't have anything that lets him roll 2 dice, so we'll just be rolling 1 dice, but he does have a might of 5. He's making his attack. He got a 4, so he has an attack of 9 against their defense of 5, which gives them 4 damage, so they're almost wiped out. Alright, so I've put 4 damage on them. Now they're doing an attack of 8. He's got an agility of 2. And 2 is 4, but his armor reduces their attack of 8 by 2, so their attack is 6 against his 4 defense, so he is going to take 2 damage. He probably should have used some willpower there. But alright, so now he's going to attack again. We're in the next round of combat. Oh my goodness. He's going to use a willpower to re-roll that. And he gets a 6, plus his might of 5 is going to be 11 against their 5. So they're going to be killed, but he does still have to defend against their next attack. So he'll roll his defense. Oh my goodness. He will spend his 2 boon to increase that to a 3, as well as 1 willpower to make that a 4. Plus his agility of 2, and their attack is reduced by 2, so it comes out even 6, so he doesn't have to take any damage. So that changeling will be defeated. He gets a reward of 1 gold. So I've given that to him here, and then now this will get shuffled back in with our foes. Well, no, that was a Morrigan foe, so that'll just go back into the deck of Morrigan and Dragon foes. Alright, that ends Hadrian's combat, so now we come to Anton. He is in a space with this undead horde, so he will be combating that. They have an ability to increase their attack by the number of other foes in the same space. There aren't any other foes in the same space. So, alright, we'll do Anton's attack. His might is 3, but it's increased by 3 because of his sword here. So he will have a might of 6, and he just rolls 1 dice. Well, actually, he's still in a hollow space, so he gets to roll 2 and choose the higher. So he will choose the 4, plus his 6 might is going to be 10 against their defense of 6, so they will take 4 damage. Alright, now he's got to roll his defense. He gets a 5, plus his agility of 3 is 8 against their attack of 8, which is actually reduced by 2 because of his mail. So he takes no damage, so we go on to the next round of combat. Alright, so again he'll roll his attack. He got a 6 plus his might of 6. Remember 3 plus 3, so 12. That's easily going to defeat these guys. So he still has to roll his defense. And he got a 6 plus his agility of 3 is 8. Minus their attack of 6, 8 minus the 2 for the armor. So he takes no damage. So he pretty easily defeated this undead horde. And that gives him a reward of 2 gold. Alright, so we've given that to him, and now we'll shuffle this back in with our foes here. Alright, and then we come to Selene, but she doesn't have any foes in her space, so nothing to do there. So that will end the combat phase. Now we do have these death cultists, that their special ability that at the end of each combat phase in Act 1, place an undead corpse on this space. Now we do have to place an undead corpse on the same space as these death cultists. Alright, so I got our undead corpse, placing it up here on this space. Boy, and that's got a shadow token too. That's going to end up being having several foes there. Anyway, and I got the card back out for the undead corpse. And that is going to wrap up our combat phase, so now we'll move on to the scenario phase. Alright, so Freya has initiative. She's up here on a wild space, so she will draw a card from the wilds deck. Treacherous path. You've been traveling for days along a narrow winding path through mountainous terrain. As you near the summit, the stones beneath your feet suddenly crumble. You begin to fall off the side of the trail. Test agility against a score of 7. Alright, well, she's got an agility of 3. She only gets to roll 1 dice. She needs at least a 4. She does not get it, so failure. So you tumble down the steep rocky surface and crash against a large boulder. A sharp pain runs up your legs as you try to rise, lose 2 health, and attach a cripple connection. So unfortunately she's got to lose 2 health and find a cripple affliction in here. Hey, they must have known she was going to get it. It's even got her picture in it. Looks like it gives her -1 to agility. This champion cannot perform any travel actions or retreat from combat. Well, that's not good. Rest to discard a crippled card instead of regaining health. Well, I guess she will have to do that. Alright, well, now we go on to Hadrian for his scenario. He is on a realm space, so we'll see what he got. Quarantine. You arrive at a quiet little town in the middle of the day to find the streets empty and the place eerily quiet. Walking along the main road, you notice worried eyes peeking down at you from the upper floor windows of closed shops. As you enter the main town square, you spot a large wagon loaded with corpses. A few bodies are also on the ground, covered in white sheets. A flaxen-haired woman is examining them. Noticing your presence, she introduces herself as a magi from the White Rose. She is studying a mysterious illness that has claimed over a dozen lives in this town. Test insight against a score of 7. Uh-oh. Well, he doesn't have a very good insight. It's only 2. So he fails. So that's not going to be good. You leave the Magi to her work and continue on your way. A few days later, you hear about the town's dead rising in the night and butchering everyone. Lose 1 willpower and place 1 undead horde on this space. So he's got to lose a willpower. And I've placed an undead horde on that space. Alright, going to move on to Anton. He is here. I think we'll have him try to do a quest now since he's on a space with a quest token. So he's going to grab a quest card. We'll look at it. The prison. You approach the tomb and notice that the outside is barred with a heavy stone door at the front. Scrawling on the walls has mostly faded to the point of being illegible, but you can make out words of warning to stay away. The front door looks to have been forced open, and you decide to investigate deeper within the burial chamber. Test awareness against a score of 7. Because he is in a hollow space, he gets to roll 2 dice because of his ability. His awareness is 3, so he needs at least a 4. We do not get it. He's going to spend a willpower to change that 3 to 4 and pass. You avoid several traps and enter the inner sanctum. So now because we passed, we go on to this next section. A stone sarcophagus covered in elaborate etchings is in the middle of a circular chamber. You notice that its lid is ajar. As the darkness retreats from the light of your torch, you see the mutilated corpses of several people that look to have been an expedition crew. They have been affixed upright along the back walls, their faces frozen in a look of horror. You see the terror set in their eyes, and an urge to escape nearly overcomes your senses. Test resolve against a score of 8. Well, normally his resolve is only 3, but he has this primordial crown, which increases his resolve plus 1, so his resolve is 4. And because he's in a hollows, he does get to roll 2, so we need at least a 4. We got it, so he's going to pass here. Trembling as you approach the sarcophagus, you force the lid completely open and peer within. A shadowy rune is placed inside. Gain 1 quest token. If there is a relic in the hand, you may equip it. Well, we don't have any relics in the hand, but he does gain this quest token. And then this will just get put at the bottom of the quest deck. Alright, and finally we have Celine. She is on a realm space, so we have to do her scenario. While traveling through a forested area, you see a sign at the fork of the road. It directs travelers to a nearby cottage for food and rest. Hungry and tired, you take the side road and arrive at a quaint wooden cabin by a small lake. An elderly man and woman greet you warmly and welcome you in. Sitting you down and pouring some tea, they offer you room and board in exchange for some simple chores. Test awareness against a score of 7. Her awareness is 3. So she needs a 4 at least. She got a 6. So she's success. You notice a slight nervousness about them and refuse to drink. So we go on to the next part. They look at you calmly and draw knives as others enter the room from the back. Place death cultists on this space and enter combat. Alright, I got another death cultist. Placed it on this space and now she has to combat them. Alright, they have a defense of 6. She only has a might of 2. So she will roll. Gets a 4 plus 2 is 6 against their defense of 6, so she doesn't do any damage. I think she's going to spend 2 willpower to increase this to a 6. So that makes it an 8, so they do take 2 damage. Now she has to defend against them. They have an attack of 8. She has an agility of 3. So 7, so she's going to take 1 damage. Alright, next round of combat. Oh no. She's going to spend an agility or a willpower to re-roll. Alright, 4 plus her might of 2 is 6. Well, their defense is 6, so she's not going to do any damage, so she's got to defend now. She only gets a 2. Plus her agility of 3 is 7, so she's against 8, so she's going to take a damage. Alright, another round of combat. Should she retreat? We'll see. 4 plus her might of 2 is a 6. She's going to spend a willpower and this boon token to change this to a 6. That's going to give her 8 damage, which is going to be enough to kill these guys, but she does still have to defend against their attack. She gets a 4, and her agility of 3 is 7 against their attack, so she's going to take 1 more damage, but they are killed. She gets 1 gold. So she has a success here. You stand over the final assailant who is bleeding out on the floor. She is the elderly woman that poured you tea. For Arwan, she murmurs before the light fades from her eyes. You search the room and find some coin. Gain 1 gold. Alright, and that is going to complete the scenario phase. So now we move on to the event phase. So we know what event card is going to come out. Each champion can choose to regain 4 health or 2 willpower. I think, so we would start with Freya to make the choice. She's going to gain her 2 willpower. So where is she here? So she'll go up 1, 2. Hadrian next. He's also going to gain 2 willpower. Next is Anton. He is also, let's see, what's his willpower? 6. Yep. He can only gain 1. And then Celine. Her health is kind of low, but she'll go ahead and gain the 2 willpower as well. So 1, 2. All right. So that's gonna wrap up the event phase, and then we would go ahead back to here where we would at the end of the turn move all foes 1 space toward the nearest capital. So this one is going to get there, this one's going to get there. Oh no, that's Hadrian. Alright, so this one will move here. Gosh, I'm trying to see. This one will move here. This one will move here. This one will move here. So 1 did make it to a capital. So because of this, each foe that moves into a capital space, each champion loses 1 willpower. And then we would have to draw and place 2 new shadow tokens, and then place foes on all the shadow tokens, and then move on to the next turn and so forth. So I think I'll wrap it up there. That gives you a good example of how the game plays. You can see it's looking like it's not looking too good for the champions already. I will say the one game I played of this before, I got beaten badly. Kind of, you know, your champions end up getting equipment, but then if they're defeated, they lose all that, and you can start over in Act 1 with a new champion, but they have nothing. So it's kind of hard. You got to build back up. So I don't know. This game seems to me like it's pretty hard. I haven't tried one of the other villains. Maybe that they're a little easier than this guy. But and then what I didn't mention is when this does move to Act 2, I'll just show this as a little spoiler. But only champions, when champions fight him, only champions that have a quest token, that have managed to get a quest token, can even do any damage to him. They're the only ones that can go into combat against him. So you got to try to make sure in Act 1, every one of your champions hopefully can at least gain a quest token so they can combat him. So I don't know. Like I said, this game seems pretty tough. I don't know how other players have done with it, but I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.